Bob, you're muted.
Um, Thank you for babysitting me. I'm Bob. I'm an alcoholic. Served with the grace of God in AA since the 10th of December, 1967. For that, I'm very grateful. Um, I started drinking when I was a freshman in high school, 4'11", 95 pounds, mostly mouth. I went to a Catholic military academy on a college campus. For some strange reason, I was on that campus yesterday and I walked it. It's a huge university and kind of extraordinary. A lot of memories on that piece of land. I I'm one of seven kids. Lovely mom and dad. My dad was my hero. Those Second World War guys. I mean, they drank hard, played hard, worked hard. I was born on third base, and congratulating myself for hitting a triple. You know, we had an intact family, got an education paid for, and got a great head start. And from the get-go, my drinking was abnormal. And by the time I finished high school, it was a really loud conversation in our home, and it was a loud conversation even on my high school campus. One of the reasons I didn't get the opportunity to join a couple of organizations was because of my reputation as a drinker. I had a chance to go away to school. I thought that'd get me away from my overly strict father and the police. I got in trouble a couple of times, and I thought my drinking would become normal. And that didn't happen. I went down. I did okay my freshman year, sort of. And then sophomore year, not so good. And junior and senior year, I was a basket case. I walked out of the University of Notre Dame in the middle of my senior year in the yearbook with my class ring. But I was carrying 25 credits a semester in civil engineering, going to school maybe one day a week. And in my senior year, I didn't even do that. I didn't even know where my classes were. I was asked to give an AA talk down there at Mishawaka, the neighboring city to South Bend, last year, and I went down, and they arranged for a priest to take my AA host and my wife and I around campus in a golf cart. In the campus, I mean, they built 40 buildings in the last 50 years, since I left. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And I was trying to figure out who that 17, 18, 19-year-old kid was. I was diagnosed an alcoholic when I was 18, 19. My parents had me under psychoanalysis. Once a year, I always had kind of a near-death experience, an accident or an arrest or something. And they did their very best to, figure out what the hell was wrong with Bob. And I looked at those kids, and I couldn't figure out. I wasn't ever conscious of making that decision, but I just took a left-hand turn and became a full-time drunk. And when I was due to walk out of school, I had to get a medical release. I was due to be commissioned that summer in ROTC, and I had to get a medical release, and that was for alcoholism. And that got me out of the Vietnam War zone. I would have been drafted immediately. I showed up back at home to a set of really disappointed parents who had no idea I was in the amount of trouble that I was in. And I finished school at a local university. And when I finished school, my dad asked me to leave home. He said, "We love you, but we don't know what the hell to do with you." And asked me to leave the house. I went out and I got a job at a liquor store. It's important to use your gifts. And I worked at that liquor store for about 6 months, stealing booze and driving drunk. And I quit that job and I got a job as a waiter downtown Minneapolis. And this is my last year of my drinking. And I'm drinking, I don't know, a pint to a fifth a day. I get up in the morning, take 2 or 3 beers, go to work as a waiter from 10 to 2. At 2, I go to a bar and drink beer. And at 5, when I leave to go for the evening shift, I buy a half pint or a pint. And I'm shacked up with waiters and waitresses. I got no permanent place to stay, $10 a night hotel rooms, and pretty grim. And I went to a party one night. I got my face kicked in, and I got fired as a waiter, and I had no place to go. I went back to my family and asked if they'd allow me to move back in the house. They asked me not to drink. I, of course, promised not to drink, and I moved back in the house. And when I moved back, and I was as tired of being the family horse's ass as they were having me be that. And I was as confused. I was a guy who had great opportunities and I was reasonably well equipped. Of the 12 guys in my class, I went down to Notre Dame. I had the highest test marks going in, and I was the only guy that didn't finish. I mean, that is the story of my alcoholism. And so I was pretty confused, and I really wanted to clear my life up, but I couldn't quit drinking. So I got back together with a woman who eventually is my wife today, which is a pretty cool deal. I applied to officer candidate school. I got accepted. I'm getting ready to go to Vietnam, and they lose my file. And they ask me to come in and take the physical again. I go in and take the physical, and they fail me for a hearing problem. I can't hear dog whistles and tree toads. And so all of a sudden, I don't have to go to Vietnam. I go out and I get a job as a trainee in a manufacturing concern. I bought my first car. I thought, wow, I'm going to be a grown up. Only I couldn't quit drinking. Now I'm the company drunk. At Notre Dame, I was the class drunk. It's pretty hard to be the class drunk at Notre Dame. It's a pretty big school, but I managed it pretty well. And now I'm in an engineering research department, and I'm falling asleep at my desk. I'm sleeping my hangovers off in the dark room with a photographer friend hides me. And when I went back to make amends with the guy who hired me, he said, God, you interviewed so well. And I said, yeah, we do. We have performance issues, but we interview well. And I quit that job about the time I was about to be fired, and I got a job, took a sales job, and I was in that sales job a very short period of time. And I went out on a 4-day drunk, and I woke up in July 1967, hugging the toilet, doing my morning exercises. And that was my moment. I'd been in that suit for 3 days. I was as disgusted with myself as I could possibly be. It had been recommended to me that I look into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I called AA. And two guys, I got on the phone with the old timer down at the central office or the A Club at that time. And he said, could you go meet a couple of guys at this restaurant? I said, yeah, I can. And so at 6 o'clock, I went and met two guys. One guy had 6 years and one guy had 6 months. They said, we're from AA. We had a drinking problem. Found an answer for it. Want to share it with you. Hope it helps you. If it doesn't help you, don't worry about it. It helps us talking to guys like you. And they told me their story. And they changed my life. I have I have been put in front of every kind of help a young person could be put in front of, religious help and legal help and medical help, and nothing took. But I had never talked to another person who had a drinking problem. And in a matter of 45 minutes, those two guys changed my life. They brought me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I met my sponsor at my first meeting. I drank twice after that meeting. After 30 days of sober, I went on a business trip to the West Coast and drank. I came back and I had almost 3 months of sobriety, and my wife and I were married in Mexico, and I drank on the honeymoon. And where the divers dive off those cliffs in Mexico, I dove off those cliffs in Mexico on my last drunk. I was in the audience watching the world's high diving contest. I thought, God, that's not so tough. And I climbed up to about 90 feet, split my swimsuit, cut my leg. My wife's going absolutely nuts with this dork up on top of this cliff. I'm trying to decide whether to jump or dive. If I would have jumped, I would have died. You have to get out 30 feet to hit the channel. And God watches after fools and drunk, because I dove and made it and had my last drink on the airplane on the way home. Some years later, my wife and I were down there with the kids vacationing, and we were watching the divers at night. I said to her, I said, honey, that's the dumbest thing I've ever done. And she said, it's not even in the top 10. So it's funny how people can take a look at a life and see it so differently. So now I'm 23, 24 years old. The man that I was lucky enough to get my sponsor was the AA champion of the Uptown group of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got to be his wingman. I got him because he recognized my name because his wife worked with my grandmother at the dairy co-op. And, what a blessing. I mean, this man, I couldn't have selected a better sponsor if I had tried. And so I became a really active member of the AA. It's funny, a lot of those old timers only went to one meeting a week. They did a lot of 12-step work, took other people to meetings, but I started going to a meeting every day. I could, my gift is I liked AA from the moment I walked in the door. I was as confused as to why my life was so shitty and why I had stuck it in the dirt as badly as I had. And I thought, my God, I found my answer. I'm an alcoholic. And I had this hope that if I could stick with the program and do what they recommend, my life would get okay. And that's what I did. I was on a honeymoon for about the first 9 months in Alcoholics Anonymous. I really didn't get deeply in touch with my defects of character until the end of my first year. And then I started one by one, my defects of character got handed to me. I had a considerable amount of unmanageability that I dragged into my sobriety. Um, I was a money spender. I spent more money than I made. If you do that over a long period of time, you end up in debt. Just want to report that to you if you don't know where that's going. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. The TV got turned on.
There's more room for imagination into free room. Welcome to Genesis. It's mesmerizing. Cleaning that greasy mess with Dawn Platinum. And not even scrubbing. Well, fluff my feathers. It cuts through the slimy stuff better than their old dish soap, removing 99%.
I have no idea how that turns itself on, but such is life. Uh, so I'm a money spender. I spend more money than I make. I'm in financial difficulty. I'm a married guy now, and I'm not unhelpful husband. My wife's an RN. She's getting up every day at 6. I get up at 9. I'm a gambler. At, you know, 4 or 5 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week, but I'm making $5,000 a year playing backgammon. It's like a second job. And my biggest issue, if those were not enough, is I was a lousy worker. I had trouble getting up in the morning. Later found out that had to do with when I went to bed. I had trouble getting to work, staying at work, and working at work. Other than that, I was a good worker. I was as useless. I mean, I just useless. It was really something. I in a short matter, and I had all these defects of character when I did my second fifth step. None of them made the list. I just didn't have the insight into the unmanageability of my life. And one by one, as I went on, I thought, you get me sober and I'll learn how to be a husband. You get me sober and I'll learn everybody knows how to work. I'll learn how to work. And I found myself sober 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And I just started around the end of my 7th year into my 8th year. And I just hit a wall. I'm a great starter, but I don't finish anything. And I'm just as disgusted with myself at 7.5, 8 years of sobriety as I was when I walked in the door of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I thought, once again, you thought you had the answer, but you're a loser. I mean, you don't finish anything. You may be well equipped, but you're not effective. And I really didn't know what to do. I had tried my best to clean these things up, and I made little or no progress on most of those issues. And finally, out of desperation, I went back to the steps for the third time. And powerless and unmanageable. I mean, anybody with a room temperature IQ could have figured out I was powerless and unmanageable. What had happened to me, unbeknownst to me, is I lost step 2. I believed it for you. I believed it for us. I didn't believe it for me. I'm 8 years sober. My pants are on fire. This is not working. I'm a loser. And I had to regain step 2. And through the grace of God, I was able to, I guess through prayer and some attention to the step, I was able to come again and believe that God was going to restore Bob Bazan's sanity. I took step 3 on my knees with my sponsor in his office. We didn't do that as much in those days, but I started to hear the people in California talk about it. And I did that. When I was done, I said, I want to do my 4th and 5th step with you. And in our group, they lined up clergy to hear your 4th and 5th step. And the first 2 4th steps I did, or 5th steps, I did with clergy. And I said, I want to do it with you. And he said, okay. And when I went to him to do my 5th step, I said, I feel like I'm ready. I feel like I'm dying of thirst lying next to a lake. I said, I know intellectually, I know what to do. I just can't or won't do it. I am so bloody sick and tired of can't or won't do it that I could just spit. And I think I'm ready to do whatever you would recommend that I do. And I did the best inventory I think I've ever done. There were no holdouts and the fifth step was powerful for me. And when I was done, my sponsor said, "You got a lot of issues around money, work, failure, and success." And he said, "I want you to find a psychologist that works with business people. I'm a mailman. And then I want you to bring that conversation back to me, and we will recapitulate that conversation with respect to AA." I thought, oh, crap. In those days, not very many people had outside help. And I felt for me to go find a psychiatrist or a psychologist was admitting I had a bad program. Hello. I mean, it's not working, Bob. And so I got a recommendation. I found a guy. He wanted to get my parents involved. I said no. He wanted to get my wife involved. I thought, well, when your wife's in the room, there's just a lot of information that doesn't seem necessary to the process of recovery, and it's a lot of it's kind of embarrassing. But I said, okay. He even wanted the kids involved, and they came a little bit, but I could never understood that. And I'm in this room, and I don't know, Wes has been going for 4 or 5 weeks, twice a week, and I'm explaining to this guy that my company's going broke, and I'm going to lose every, I'm busting my ass 2, 3 hours a day. And when I explained this to him, he looks at me and he said, "Why are you so afraid of failing?" And it was like he punched me. I mean, I had this sense about, maybe punching him, but he went right to the middle of what was going on in my life. And what I discovered in that man's office was fear. I thought fear had to do with dog snakes and tall buildings. I was totally uninsightful. You think a guy that today we weren't as good with the book back then as we are today. You think a guy that had done 3 inventories would have done a better fear inventory. I didn't do a very good. I don't even know if I did it at all. And what I discovered was I'm afraid of being a husband. I'm afraid of being a dad. I'm afraid of, you know, I'm afraid of work. I'm afraid of failure. Hell, I'm afraid of success. And I'm swimming in fear, and I'm immobilized by it. And I didn't know what to do. So I left that guy's office. And about a week later, I had a really bad day. I went to work late, left early, got in a backgammon game. I won $500. I missed dinner. I got in a fight with my wife. And I'm in the living room, 11 o'clock at night, and I just can't believe what a horse's ass I am. And I realized that I had tried as hard as I knew how to try, ineffectively, but I had tried as hard as I tried to clean my act up, and I'd failed. And I don't know if I could have said those words and believed them as much as I believed them that night. And I was given the opportunity to take the 6th and the 7th step of the program at a depth that I had never taken it before. I had never paid much attention to 6 and 7. I don't think I believed in 6 or 7 because I'm 8 years sober and it's not working. And was I ready to have God remove his character? Sure. Humbly ask him. Okay. But I mean, nothing happened. And it wasn't like nothing happened. It wasn't like there wasn't anything that got better. I was a very active member of AA, and there were a lot of good things that were happening too. I built a good foundation, as ineffective as my program was. And when I got down on my knees and I took those, my life turned around like it was on a lazy Susan. All of a sudden, I turned the checkbook over to my wife. I started dating my wife every Friday night for the next 30 some years. I got counseling about being a better dad. I quit gambling that night in my living room. I've been trying to quit gambling for 5 or 6 years, and I ineffectively. And as I say, I got in an allowance. My wife gave me $100 a week in cash, and I tore up the credit cards. And all of a sudden, my life really started to change. I've always been smart. I just never been effective. And all of a sudden, so in addition to that, I hired a woman to call me at 5:30 in the morning. What a joke. I'm getting up at 9 before, and now moderation in all things, but I went to 6 o'clock mass during the week. And after mass, I'd go to a side altar and I'd say, God, give me your mind. I don't know what to do. Well, BS. I knew what to do. I either couldn't or wasn't doing it. And I'll be damned. He gave me his mind. And all of a sudden, the guy that wasn't effective started to be able to make sales calls. I was a salesman who didn't make sales calls. I just lied about my activity. I didn't even take a chance that you'd grab me by the throat and pull me across the desk and force me to sell you something because I wasn't there. And all of a sudden, it didn't matter that I was scared or didn't want to do it. And I started to make sales calls. And I started to make some sales, and my income. I don't think there was a month after that date that I didn't make as much in a month that I made in the previous year. And it really was, it was a lucky time to be in the business that we were in. So there's a little bit of luck involved in business. And all of a sudden, I was making enough money to burn a wet elephant. And very active member of AA. And not too long after that, they changed the tax act, and I started a process, a 2 or 3 year process of losing everything that I had. I lost $10 million. I lost the big house. I negotiated, myself and my partner negotiated out of bankruptcy with the banks. That was a collapse of real estate market, which stayed collapsed for about 6 or 7 years. All the banks in Texas went broke. All the big, everybody was in trouble in our business. Most of the stuff we owned was no longer worth anything. And we were really lucky to get through that thing. The banks believed everything we told them. We gave them all the money we had and sold our houses, and they let us wobble through that very difficult time. And after about 4 or 5 years, we started to crawl out of it, and our business has been pretty successful ever since then. And that was the toughest time. It had never occurred to me. I've got this big house, it had 11 bedrooms, and I'm driving 2 Mercedes, and it just never occurred to me that I could lose it all. And I was, when you tell that story, a lot of times you think, well, you did a pretty good job walking through that, Tiger. Well, I was sucking my thumb under my desk in the fetal position for a considerable period of time doing that. I may have done a number of things. One of the things I did right is I stayed very active in AA. There is no better place in the world to rebuild your life than Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was, as depressed as I was given the opportunity to stay active. And I started to crawl my way out of it. And it has been, kind of an extraordinary story. That 6 and 7 step was the linchpin that I really understood that I could not do it. It wasn't my intellect. It wasn't my understanding of the steps. It wasn't my intention. I was unable to bring those steps into effectiveness into my life alone. And I needed a spiritual connection, not just an intellectual connection, not an understanding, because I had an intellectual understanding of the program and steps, but I didn't have the relationship with the God of my understanding that my sponsor and most of the older people in the group had, and I had to find that. And one of the ways I found that it was interesting, about that time I got in touch with I was given an AA talk in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and I ran into Bob and Marceline White, and they just altered Linda and my life. Those people in Texas were just exactly what I needed at exactly the right time. Those related to Jeff Warren on the meeting, Mike Warren and Gail and all those people. And I really got the distinction between religion, which I was a practicing Catholic, and spirituality. And they introduced me to meditation. They introduced me to meditation books, and I started a practice which has put me in pretty good stead over that period of time. It is, my life, as I say, has been extraordinary. It is. We have 3 boys, and they're boys. 57, 53, and 30. I know their names. I don't know their ages. and 41. And they're really good guys. And at one time, all three of them were in Alcoholics Anonymous. We had, so we had, Mr. AA, they were using my house to smoke dope and bring their friends over. And I'm out saving the world and I don't know what's going on. And it's been an interesting ride. Our oldest boy is sober 35 years and he does not go to AA, but he's a wonderful man. And our middle son's very active in AA. And our youngest always had trouble going to AA. He had about 17 years and then he went back out. He's smoking a little dope, but he's okay. It's not my job to, all three of them are okay. They're good men, which is a blessing. And my wife has been 58 years in Al-Anon and been an unbelievable partner during this process. I mean, to have a partner that when you're standing on the dining room table peeing in the mashed potatoes and she's looking for her part, you've got someone who is really committed to bringing the principles into action. And she has been the heart source of our family. And it has been an extraordinary partnership and a great ride. Uh, So I don't have any doubt that in Alcoholics Anonymous, if we put the principles in action in our lives, that miracle, that spiritual awakening, that transformation, not a change, it's more like a sex change operation than an improvement. It's not just an idea. It's not just a tip. It is a life-changing process. And once I stopped lying, once I took all the dividers out of my life, once I got all the way in and laid clear all the things that were going on in my life, I started to receive the full benefit, not just the partial benefit of being a really active guy, but not being able to have the spirituality that I needed to get the full measure of the program. And every once in a while, because I'm an old timer, people ask me, "Are you worried about AA?" And I say, "No, I'm not." And they say, "Well, why?" And I said, "Where else would you go? Where else would you go? Where else would you go that treats the whole deal, physical, mental, and spiritual? Who else would you talk to? Where would you get the kind of help we have?" I mean, this is not, I mean, it's just extraordinary. And I think today, in most ways, we are doing better work with the book and better work with sponsorship than we ever have. This idea that almost everybody, as a practical matter, when they're working with someone, brings them through the book. I mean, we were not doing that. Joe and Charlie kind of created a renaissance, in the 80s or 70s with the big book. And all of a sudden, I mean, that we are an oral society and we are an evolving society. And with people staying sober as long as we are today, people are very interested in putting these principles in action, not just for abstinence, not just for sobriety, physical sobriety, but to be able to have the full measure of their lives. And that's the conversation that is happening all over in Alcoholics Anonymous today, not just abstinence. It's how to live your life, how to be able to deal with life on life's terms. One of the most surprising things to me as I look back on my journey is I always assumed if I said to everybody on the screen, how many people really want to get rid of whatever problems they're having and are hurting themselves and other people, all of us would probably raise our hands. But the fact is that the seed of the disease is in the subconscious, and the subconscious does not want to change. The subconscious says, look, do what you want to do. You want to go to meetings, go to meetings. You want to take the steps, take the steps. But get this straight, we're not changing. Why is it that many of us have these stubborn problems that we're sober 5, 6, 10, 15, many years, trouble with our marriage or work or whatever is going on. And we assume that we want to change them. Well, we got two things. And part of us wants to, and part of it definitely is afraid to. It just, and we get in front of the fear and we back away from it. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talks about the 5 stages of death and dying: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And Scott Peck, the guy that wrote a book, A Road Less Traveled, later when he wrote a second book called Further Along the Road Less Traveled, and when he talked about significant change in life, your psyche views that as a death. And what happens, he said, most people think when a death occurs that they go through the 5 stages of death and dying: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. They go through denial. This isn't really happening. Anger, why the hell is this happening to me? This is unfair. Bargaining is, God, take this away and I'll do anything that you do. But they get in front of depression and they back away from it and they go back and recycle into denial, anger, and bargaining in a circular manner, and they never get through the depression. But he says, but if you get through the depression and you allow depression to do its work, which is to grind the ego to dust. And that's what happened to me at 8 years of sobriety. My ego at that moment was ground to dust, and I was able to stand in front of my life. I stood in front of what I thought my alcoholism was when I came in AA, and I accepted it. But later I built a wall back up, and there were things in my life that I lied about and wasn't. I had, part of the mind of a practicing alcoholic. At that 8 year period of time, I had a surrender experience, and my wall came down, and I was able to stand naked in front of my life, all of it, and it altered me. And that was, the big turning point for me. And it's understanding how resistant many of us are because of fear. It is just extraordinary what a role that plays in a lot of our lives. And it takes a real courage for us to stand up and take on what life is throwing at us. It is, and lastly, the thing that, makes a big difference in our lives is service. I think if you've got the program and it's working in your life, you're going to help someone. Not everybody has to sponsor 10 people or something, but if you can, everybody should have the experience of sponsoring at least one or two people. It is one of the great experiences of life. Getting married is one of the great experiences. Having children is one of the great experiences. But I'm telling you, working with another person and taking them through the steps is an extraordinary experience, and one not to be missed if we can. You don't have to be, the service happens in all sorts of different ways. But that is one of the most, that's one of the most dramatic and important elements for us. And the other element is when we take the steps. Back in the day, when I was first in AA, there were a lot of old timers that didn't do a 4 and 5. And that we weren't as good with the steps and weren't as good with the book during that time. Today, almost everybody doesn't have much of an issue with 4 and 5. A lot of us have had psychology help. And that process is one that we're not as afraid of. But there's a lot of issues about 8 and 9. And a lot of the younger people in the meeting have enormous, when I was having financial trouble, I couldn't get into later my business debts were large, but you couldn't get $50,000 of credit card debt. You couldn't get into the kind of trouble that you can get into today. And people just despair of being able to deal with the student loans and the financial and the medical stuff that they have going on. And they really need, some serious help with their sponsor and maybe even with a financial counselor to deal with those things. And that is the thing that when I see someone who's a serial slipper, almost always they've never done a complete job with 8 and 9. And 8 and 9 is the completion of the work. It really is the de facto proof that we have performed the work, from 4 through 9. And it is a booster rocket. In doing 8 and 9, our integrity is restored. It is until that happens, most of us have a holdback, a secret, something we're just not, we haven't cleaned the house enough to be able to have the full measure of our integrity. And a lot of times we wonder why we are not being as successful in our relationships and successful in all of life is relational. Your children, your wife, your job, everything is relational. And so when you have issues that you're not doing well with relationships and you have barriers that you haven't really cleaned it all up with 8 and 9, you're dealing with one hand tied behind your back. And so today it is, thank God that we are taking people through the steps in a really formal and powerful way. And we're watching people, get that kind of help and get through that process and have the benefit of the full measure, of the program. It is to explain to you how wonderful, my life is today. I am able to just be with what is. I'm retired, hell, I'm 82 years old next month. And I got a great relationship with my children. I love my wife. Uh, I don't say that like that's me. It's you. It is what was given to me as a byproduct of trying to be the best member of Alcoholics Anonymous that I could be. And you have taught me what it is to be a man. You've taught me what it is to be a good man. And I have been able to experience pretty well the joy of being a good man. I just, those first 7 or 8 years, I worked my butt off in AA, but I was ineffective. And once I had that second surrender and got all the way in, where there was nothing in my way, I was transformed. I was changed. And I was able to be the kind of husband that I was supposed to be, and able to be the father that I was supposed to be, and able to be the worker that I had never been effective in doing. And that has given me, an enormous opportunity. Plus, my wife and I were talking the other night. My wife celebrated her 80th birthday, and we had a birthday party, and we had our family and about 13 other friends. And I had two people there that I went to high school with. Of my 6 high school buddies, 4 of us are members of Alcoholics Anonymous, 2 of our wives. I mean, I never knew Catholics had drank more than other people, but if we're having a contest, I'm bringing my folks. Uh, and all of us have more than 45 years of sobriety, and we all have 58 years of marriage, 57 years of marriage, which is kind of a funny combination, to think about all those numbers, to have everybody, and then we lost one of that group about 2 months ago. And he was, God, what a wonderful man, 55 years sober and maybe 56 years sober. So I don't know how I would ever thank the people who have given me the gift of a new life. I mean, to be able to have a second life, to be able to have the friends that we have. The majority of our friends are people in the program, but I live in the same town I was born in. I have a lot of people that I see that I went to grade school with and high school with, and I'm one of 7 kids, and I'm, very close to my brothers and sisters. And to be able to have all those, we had a family reunion this summer, and we had 135, 140 people there. And to my knowledge, in that group, there is not a cross word. There is not a major resentment relationship going on with anybody in the family, which I think is just extraordinary. I don't know what, you talk about a blessing. I mean, that's really a blessing. So my message is, as much as possible, come on into AA, sit all the way down, put your entire life on the line, get rid of the boundaries, get rid of the fences, get rid of the hiding, and do the deal. I love you. Thanks for everything.